come down on the same
So
thing. Yeah.
so okay, so with affirmative action, what are your thoughts on that?
If I were a black person, I would be so offended at the idea that you have to lower the bar for me. You think I can't compete? You're going to lower the standard of admission because you don't think I could cut it in a fair test? Oh man, I hate that idea. And any black person who succeeds on their own is looked at by some people like, oh, affirmative action. Awful. We used to call that when I was on campus. We call that I think it was called like a hat bid. It was somebody who didn't. There are private eating clubs at Princeton that you have to. The process is called bicker. It's like a I don't know how to explain it. It's such a bizarre and antiquated kind of thing. But you have to be interviewed at these various eating clubs over a period of 4 or 5 nights. And if they want you, you'll receive an invitation to join one of these very elite clubs. But when I was on campus, the rules included a provision that if you bickered at every club every night, you were assured an invitation from at least one. At least one. So those people who received, they were called the hat bid because the names of all these losers that nobody wanted got put in a hat, and the clubs would pick out, in order, the few that they had to take that they didn't really want. So I always feel like, the idea of affirmative action, why would you put that on yourself? Why would you give anybody that ammunition to say, oh, you know, yeah, he graduated from so yeah, okay, well, he was no doubt an affirmative action. He was a hat bid.
Let me jump in on what you said about the hat bid, and the bicker and stuff like that. Here's the reason that affirmative action is fine, um, and why it's called for and why it's necessary in a country that truly wants to pursue racial healing. Um, Basically, there the the thing that's worse than being looked at in a funny way because you didn't get the job is to simply not get the job at all, to never get the opportunity. Before affirmative action, you had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of very smart black people who applied for all kinds of jobs, and they would just their application would be thrown in the garbage because they were black. And with affirmative action, what it did was it opened the door for them to at least get an opportunity. Now, they did have the stigma of being affirmative action hires or whatever, but that stigma was not as bad as being unemployed, unable to feed your family. And also, you already have a stigma for being black anyway. And so, in general, when I think about the job I got at Syracuse University, I know that was an affirmative action job, but I know my qualifications were second to none. I know that I studied under some of the best people in the world in my field, but I also know that I was not the first smart black man to apply for that job. I was just the first smart black man they had to give serious consideration to, because someone, the dean or a president, or I think it was a provost, said you have 90 professors in your business school, none of them are black.
You better
That's
hire yourself
wrong.
like that.
You need
Right.
to hire someone. Find some good ones and hire them. They're out there. Another example, I met a guy when I gave a King Day speech this weekend, where this guy had he talked about how he he got a job on the police force, and they didn't have any black cops and they didn't want to hire him. And so someone had filed some lawsuit and they were forced to hire him, and they treated him like crap. I mean, horribly. Within 10 years, he was the first black police chief in that department, and then in that same town, he became the first black judge. And now, as a result, he has 21 grandchildren and a great grandchild, and you saw his big family there and all this great legacy there in this family, and none of that would have turned out the way it did. Where they were all very proud of him, he was receiving an award. None of that would have turned out the way it did if he had not been given the opportunity to show how bright he was. So I'm a fan of affirmative action for that reason. I think that the idea of having to lower standards is it is it again, it's you have to be careful because that can be indicative of white supremacy, because what you're kind of saying is that if I'm black and someone has to confront the racism of the institution to let me in, that they've somehow lowered the standards. No, what you've done is you've actually improved the standards by dealing with the fact that your standards have already been low due to the fact that you're only letting white people in the first place. When you're only letting white people into your institution, you're losing because you're not picking the best and the brightest that are out there. There's no way that an institution can exist 100 100 years and hire almost all white people and claim that we are the absolute best we could be, because then you're assuming that no person of color on the planet is smart enough to be in that particular organization. Which, and if you walk away thinking that in the least, then that's white supremacy. Like that's a problem.
I understand what you're saying.
I would never have an institution that was all black all the time, 100%, and say, well, hey, it's all black because we're the only ones who are good enough to do this job. That
No,
would be insane, right?
of course it's insane. Maybe it's all white because only white candidates have applied. Or maybe the
Well,
black candidates.
that's not true at Princeton now. Come on.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Maybe. Well, now it's different. Now it's very well integrated. I think very well integrated, although there's a group on campus, the Black Justice League, who feels we are not integrated enough and that Woodrow Wilson's name should go
What
and we should have. And
what's the
they're
development with
excellent.
that? You said the Black Justice League in Princeton is protesting against what,
The
the Woodrow
name
Wilson
Woodrow
thing.
Wilson.
Okay, so what? How is that?
Yeah,
Where does that stand right now?
no, well, I don't know. It. I do know where it is. It's going to a series of conversations among faculty, administration, students, and alumni to get a sense of what the university community as a whole, how we would like to address it, if we would like to address it at all. But some of the other demands that they have include they want separate housing, they want a separate dining room, they want. I'm thinking, what is this? Now they're fighting for segregation. Now they want they're not looking for integration, they want segregation. So it seems like this is a huge step backwards, but whatever. I want to go back to affirmative action for a minute. I don't think that it's that only that any institution thinks only white people are good enough to be here. I think that institutions that are predominantly white like that are because black candidates don't apply, or not many black candidates apply, or maybe only a few black candidates apply, and maybe those few blacks don't get the job because they're not the best candidates.
And
I
I
think
think that's
lowering
exactly,
the standard and
it, it,
lowering the
but
standard
that's exactly what they
is
want.
insulting.
That's exactly what people want you to believe, and that's the easiest thing to believe if you've already been trained to accept white supremacy. Because the thing is that the greatest evidence. If you look at the evidence, what's more likely, that no black person wants to go to Princeton, or that a school that's built on a foundation that included people like Woodrow Wilson, who felt inherently and wrote repeatedly that blacks are inferior, that school has racial biases that come from the foundation on which it was established? That seems more likely to me. This school that prides itself on being connected to Woodrow Wilson must also accept the liabilities and the limitations that come with being so closely attached to Woodrow Wilson's legacy,
I
right?
understand that.
Right?
I understand that. Well, but in the same, okay. So if I were a black person, I don't know that I would apply to Princeton. As a white person, I never applied to Howard University. Makes perfect sense that I wouldn't. Howard University didn't want. Why are you laughing at that? Howard University didn't want me. They
Well,
didn't want me.
you told me you went to school with black kids growing up, right? So why wouldn't Howard be fun? You could be like Maggie. There was a white girl named Maggie on A Different World. Did you ever watch Different World? Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
remember
yeah,
Maggie?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could have been Maggie in A Different World. Why? What's wrong with that?
I could have been, but the point is I didn't apply. And I'm saying maybe black candidates don't apply to Princeton in such great numbers because they feel like, that's and it's not just black candidates. Jewish candidates didn't do very well at Princeton either, by the way. There was, through the 20s, the 30s, and even into the 40s, there was a very distinct effort to suppress the number of Jewish candidates on campus. In fact, there was a book written about this called The Chosen, and it's absolutely fascinating book that talks about the admission process at the most elite Ivy League colleges. And, it's embarrassing to me that Princeton factors so heavily into this. There was a time when literally there were memos written saying we have to suppress the number of Jewish students because they comprise such an unattractive population with their big noses and their whatever. They comprise such an unattractive population. So what happened was, and the reason there were so many Jews on campus, on all the Ivy League campuses, but only Princeton would be so dumb as to actually have this stuff in writing, is they were just taking the smartest kids, the kids who did best in school, best on standardized tests, and that's why it accounted for so many Jews. So in the 30s or the 40s, when it became clear they wanted a more diverse population, fewer Jews, what they did was they implemented this whole admissions office policy of considering a bunch of other stuff. extracurricular things and other sort of touchy-feely things, which basically gives the university liberty to modify the standards for admission to allow them to admit whoever they want, basically, with no meritocracy. In the absence of the meritocracy of taking, Stuyvesant High School. Do you know Stuyvesant High School here in New York City?
No, I've heard of Bedford Stuyvesant
No, no,
as a
no, no, no.
community, but not a.
I don't know. Stuyvesant High School is well, arguably, it's the finest public high school, certainly in the city of New York. Many will tell you in the country. You look it up. Stuyvesant High School. It's 100 years old. It's the best and the brightest. Of course, both of my boys went there. It's a public high school, and the way you get into the school is you take one test when you're a senior in middle school, when you're in eighth grade. So 26,000 middle school kids take this test every year, and Stuyvesant High School takes the top 800 based on one test. That's it. It's a pure meritocracy. Only this is what their admission process is. You take this test. It's very math science focused. The top 800 kids out of 26,000 are admitted to the school. That's it. What is the breakdown? You want to take a guess? What is the ethnic breakdown of this school?
I have no idea.
75% Asian.
Is
It's
that
all Asian. It's all Asian. A tiny little, and I used to go to the school for concerts and this, that, and a million other things. The entire school is Asian. It's completely Asian. Complete. And the 25% that isn't gets lost in the shuffle. They're white. There are a couple of kids from Russia. I think there were in my son's class. I think there were like 6% black, and even a smaller percentage of Latino. Straight off the top, this was a colorblind, race blind, pure meritocracy. So,
well?
I would say to you, is this white supremacy at work here? Is that why there aren't more
No,
black students?
well, I mean, the thing is,
It
first of
is.
all, I'm not going to say that their process is just, abominable. I don't think it is. I agree. I think, especially on the surface, it can appear that it's as equitable as you can get. We look at the test score and that's it.
Right.
Um, I think that um, what some would say, and I'm not saying everyone is right who says this, but what some would say is that you must consider that you live in a society that has um, structures and scenarios that will make it more difficult for that black child to have the math and science ability to get into that school based on what they have to work with, right? Wealth inequality, for example. If I'm born in a neighborhood where there's gunshots and crack, and my father was sent away to prison for 50 years for possession of a small amount of drugs or any something like that, it's gonna be, even if I'm as smart as that Asian kid across town, I'm not gonna be ready to go take that test. I'm gonna, but again, now is this Stuyvesant High School's responsibility to care? Some would say no. I agree, it's not. But as a society, I think we have to consider the fact that we are losing a lot of our best and brightest because we force some kids to grow up in just deplorable situations, and these are not created by black people.
What do you mean we force them?
Well, we force them because if you go back and again we talked about the mass incarceration epidemic, and it's one thing if people break the law. Millions of Americans break the law, but some Americans get short sentences. Some Americans get sent away forever. And when you send people away forever, you destroy families. You destroy,
Right.
like that man I told you about, who has the grandkids and
Right.
this beautiful family. I'm sure at some point he's broken the law doing something. Everyone does something that they probably shouldn't do. I'm not saying it's bad. It could be
Yeah.
jaywalking, it could be whatever, right? And if he's made a mistake at any point in his life, and someone said, "Oh, we're going to send you away for life," what happens is all that kind of disappears, all that changes. So ultimately, as a society, what we have to fight for those of us who want to stay in America and want to try to work out things with the broader population, you have to fight for laws and whatnot that are fair, because basically one of the keys to oppressing black people has been to change the laws in such a way that you allow yourself to really really hurt people of color, and then you can say, hey, look, we're not doing anything racist. It's the law. Look, the law is written right here on a piece of paper, but no one talks about who signed that piece of paper. You can go all the way back to the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and see things that were written that were clearly biased against African Americans, and because it was written by slaveholders, right? So that's the challenge that I think a lot of black people run into. But I tend to be in support of what you're saying, that that the best way to deal with discrimination is to try to get away from it. I push very hard to get people of color to understand that we can do it on our own. As you mentioned, you said when you talked about Jada earlier, you said there's nothing stopping you. There's nothing stopping you from creating something of your own. Sometimes access to money can be tough, but for Jada Pinkett, it's that's not an issue, right?
Shouldn't be too hard. Get a hold of Oprah. I mean, really, there's money there to be had. I don't believe that within the black community of performers, entertainers, actors, that there isn't money enough to, form a production company or form a distribution company that allows for, the black community to have their own motion picture industry. What I wonder is, would it be supported by a broader population?
Well,
I
well,
don't know.
you
That
know, well, the thing is, black people, we're very creative and very capable, and there are lots of things that we start. We're trendsetters. We do things, and other people love it. So I agree with you, and I think that what's interesting to me, and this is the last thing I have to say on this, is that white supremacy a lot of times is most directly supported by black people. There
said
there are millions of black people who are indoctrinated to white supremacy to the point that they really feel that they can't do anything without getting the blessing from white America. And that's what I tell them. I take the Susan Patton approach and say, who cares what people think about you? You do what's
right,
best for you. And
exactly.
so that's where I think that's a good place to close out, because I think that that's where we're gonna agree. And I tell everybody that's listening, I insist on loving you no matter what.
Love you
And
back.
absolutely. And so thank you. This has been fun.
Always a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to reading the comments. Uh, I hope that our viewers will be more gentle. They're not
Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna
okay.
happen.
Whatever. You could follow me on Twitter at the Princeton Mom. One last comment. A couple of people asked about this black ribbon that I'm wearing. It's representational of a rended garment. I lost my mother the week before last, and in Jewish tradition, you wear a rended garment. You tear your clothing over your heart to acknowledge, to recognize a broken heart at the
Hmm.
loss of a parent. So, to answer your question,
And you said your mother was a survivor.
my
Um.
mother survived Auschwitz,
Wow.
and my father was a survivor of Bergen-Belsen, and he passed 13 years ago. But some of our viewers wanted to understand this black ribbon, and that's what it is.
Well, my condolences to you and your
I
family.
thank you. I thank you. And I look forward to reading the sweet, warm comments that I know our viewers, they're going to say, that's Susan. We just love her. We just love her. She's just a great gal. Isn't that what they're going to say?
Well, I
Well,
love it. I just love the idea of a white woman begging for black people to accept her, the way we spend our lives begging for white people to like us. This
I,
is great. It's
yes,
nice to see the tables turn. So we're gonna keep
uh,
we'll keep working, and I'll be your advocate. I'll be your
I love
mentor. You
that.
can join our affirmative action program, and we'll let you into our group. How about that?
Sounds
All right. Well, it's very good to see you again, Susan. And everybody, this is Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. You got to go and check out some of her stuff online. She fights. She doesn't just fight with us. She's fought with a lot of people on CNN and all these other major places. So you got to see it. It's good stuff. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.